Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Nobody Asked Me Guy show. Ladies and gentlemen, listen, we have with us Reverend Dr. Gerald L. Durley. You are going to be thoroughly impressed, just as I am. Dr. Durley is a wealth of information. As a matter of fact, there's an old African proverb that says, when the elders die, it's like burning down a library. And so that's so we librarian sitting here with us today in the personage of Dr. Durley. And I'm going to share some information with you about Dr. Durley as we look at his resume. I always call bios resumes, by the way. And also for our regular audiences, you know how we do. You know, you can get one of these cameras, you can come on and FaceTime Dr. Durley and speak to him just as I'm speaking with you, or you can put your questions in the box. And we know that a lot of you just like to watch, and we appreciate it as I'm watching the monitor now up here. And we know a lot of you, but listen, Dr. Durley is here with us, and without further ado, we will be sharing with Dr. Durley. Now, the Reverend Dr. Gerald L. Durley was born in Wichita, Kansas. He grew up in California and graduated from high school in Denver, Colorado. He was recruited to play basketball for Tennessee State University, where he became a student leader in the civil rights movement of the 1960s. Upon earning a degree in psychology, Dr. Durley became one of the first U.S. Peace Corps volunteers to serve in Nigeria. Now, upon leaving Nigeria, he relocated to Switzerland and played basketball for a national Swiss team while completing postgraduate studies. After arriving back in America, he entered Northern Illinois University, where he completed the Master's of Science degree in Community Mental Health Psychology. After graduation, he became the founder and administrator of a program that recruited and educated African Americans about their heritage. He entered the University of Massachusetts and completed the doctorate degree in urban education and psychology. Now, further, Dr. Durley became a program manager in the U.S. Department of Education. He created and wrote programs for interdisciplinary studies for historically Black colleges and universities with the Institute for Services to Education Incorporated. Now, moving even further, being a dedicated educator and an effective psychologist, a nationally and internationally sought after motivational speaker, Dr. Durley was gravely disturbed by the decaying moral, social, culture, and family value system throughout the nation. This concern compelled him to enroll at the Howard University School of Divinity and to earn the Master's of Divinity. Now, today, as we'll be speaking with Dr. Durley, he became dean at Clark College and a program administrator at Morehouse School of Medicine. Both of these schools are located in Atlanta, Georgia. He directed major health, social, and civic programs across the state of Georgia. Now, Reverend Durley was also a pulpit associate at Mount Olive Baptist Church in Washington, D.C., and at the historic Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia. After 25 years of service, he retired as a pastor of Providence Missionary Baptist Church and is currently the pastor emeritus. Now, while serving as pastor, he became intensely involved in the climate change, global warming, and environmental justice movement. Reverend Dr. Durley now combines the disciplines of faith and science with the lessons learned as a civil human rights advocate from the 1960s. He believes that God created a perfect ecological balanced world for humans to care for, but we are destroying it at an alarming rate. He asserts that for the environment to be saved, the educational, scientific, business, political, and faith communities must seek common solutions. Now, Dr. Durley has served as past president of the Concerned Black Clergy of Atlanta, co-chair of the Regional Council of Churches of Metropolitan Atlanta, and Head Start Executive Director. He serves on the board of the March of Dimes, Civil and Human Rights Global Adversary, Communities and School of Atlanta, Georgia Power Diversity Council, Georgia Interfaith Corrections, Interfaith Power and Light, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People of Atlanta. A few notable awards and recognitions include the White House Champion of Change Award, Citizen of Georgia Award, Citizen of Atlanta Award, Phoenix Award, Who's Who in the Black America, Who's Who in Christian Leadership, Influential People in Atlanta, Morehouse College Institute of Preachers, Friends of Arve Institute Environmental Award, Trailblazer of Green Church Award, Morehouse College Presidential Award of Distinction, W.E.B. Du Bois NAACP Award of Distinction, Atlanta Urban League Jesse O. Davis Award, Islamic Speakers Bureau Award, National Action Network Award, Aman W. Dean Muhammad Distinguished Service Award, Tuskegee Religious Leadership Award, Coca-Cola Diversity Award, and a number of other awards, certificates of recognition, and certificates of appreciation. Dr. Durley has appeared on a variety of radio and television programs and is quoted in newspapers and magazines around the world, breaking down barriers between Muslims, Jews, and Christians. Reverend Durley has traveled to Jerusalem, Turkey, Morocco, Spain, Africa, Brazil, France, Switzerland, Canada, Mexico, Italy, Iceland, Germany, and other destinations. He's been married for almost 50 years to his wife, Maria. They have 2 children and 4 grandchildren. His autobiography, I Am Amazed, guys, I have 2 copies. I Am Amazed is available at Amazon. So, guys, as you can see, we have a very, wow, I see all of these thumbs going up, Dr. Durley, and all these hearts. As you can see, we have a very interesting gentleman here with us. I throw the word around, Renaissance people sometimes. Put your hat on it. This is the Renaissance man. So good evening, Dr. Durley. It's great to have you with us, sir.
I am so honored. I am so pleased to be here with your audience, and I'm just humbled. I didn't know all that stuff you were reading. It made me feel like I was about 90 years old, but I'm glad that God has blessed us to be with you today.
Well, Dr. Durley, you know what? We all know that age is simply birthdays and that somebody had to be born first. However, all of the things that we're reading here simply speaks to the awesome man that you are. And as we talk about the pieces here, as we're reading, I'd like to jump in and ask this question, and please feel free. We want you to talk about anything that you feel like talking about. And I just wonder, when we talk about the civil rights movement in the 1960s, and you were a scholarship recipient at Tennessee State University, and you were involved in the process of civil rights. Did that ever pose a problem for you, possibly maybe your teammates or your coaches or individuals that were athletic followers?
What was that last part, Melvin?
If it posed did it ever pose difficulties with relationships with you being an advocate for the civil rights movement among some of your teammates or your coaches?
Well, when you think about the civil rights movement and my coming from Denver, Colorado to Nashville, Tennessee in 1960, our parents did not want us to get involved in all of that. They were concerned about our health. The coaches naturally didn't want us to get involved because you were on a scholarship and they brought you there to play basketball, not to march and sit at counters. So there was always a healthy kind of tension. But anything that you feel strongly about in life, if the cause is greater than where you are, then you've got to be willing to do 2 things that the civil rights movement taught all of us who were students. What are you willing to sacrifice and what are you willing to risk? If you're not willing to sacrifice nor risk, then you should not be in the movement. I was willing to sacrifice the basketball scholarship and take a risk because it was important that we could ride in front of the white line on the bus and buy a house where we could afford. So consequently, I was not running in opposition with my teammates. As far as the school was concerned, I was on a completely different level. In fact, my senior year, they took my scholarship, but faculty members came together and raised money, and I finished my senior year. But that was the time, that was the era in which Black folks understood their place and knew how to stay in their place. We were fighting to change our place and then establish a new place. And then when we established a new place, we felt good about that, but we had to sacrifice.
Wow. Wow. That is certainly a novel way to look at life and to look at things. You said 2 things: change our place and willing to sacrifice. Sadly, we see as we saw in your bio that that just doesn't seem to be happening at this day and time, Doc. Now, with that spoken and having lost your scholarships and the teachers having to put together some funds to get you through, did your parents sit you down and have the talk about what you might be giving up or what you shouldn't be doing?
No. You'll find that a lot of the parents My mother, she didn't finish high school. My dad, he did finish high school, but they were not that involved. My home was Denver, Colorado. It's a great distance between Denver, Colorado and Nashville, Tennessee in 1960, 59 years ago. So consequently, they did not know all that I was involved with. They just knew that their son had gone to Tennessee State to play basketball. Now, my colleagues from Memphis and from Jackson, Mississippi and other places, their parents talked to them because they grew up in a segregated South. They grew up in the segregated high school. My high school was not segregated. I had Latinos and Chinese and all of that. So it was a different kind of feeling that our parents had. So the parents who were living in the South, they had that conversation with their children. My parents had no context to talk to me about that because I was not in that environment.
Mm-hmm. You know, Doc, as you share that, allow me please to ask you, when the coaches and or the university seem to have had opposition to your actually working to make things not only better for young men and women in your age group, but for them as well. Did it give you a feeling of maybe consternation with them, or did you accept the fact that maybe because of their indoctrination that it was okay for them to be in opposition?
No, and we've got to understand one thing. The president of the university, Dr. Walter Struthers Davis, was a man that had finished Columbia University. Most of our professors finished many of the largest white schools, Princeton and all this. This is why those of us who went to historically black colleges and universities, we got a better education than our other friends who went to some of the larger white schools, because our professors had gone through those white schools, and more importantly, they understood the segregated South. They understood the political South. So when we went into their classroom, they knew how to feed us politically, educationally, psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually. And that was the strength. So they were not in opposition. So when they came around and said, you need to look at this. Now, if you're going to go down to that bus station tonight, this is what you might lose. Then they would talk to you about that. Then you had to make a decision. Am I going to go or not? But they never, ever tried to just stop us, because they knew that it was very important for what we were doing at that time. So they were never what you call opposition. They would advise us. They were strong advisors. My advisor, and I think about him right now, he's 97 years old, Calvin Atchison. Dr. Calvin Atchison said, Durley, I grew up in Alabama. Let me tell you what happened to me before I finished Yale. And he would tell me that. And I said, well, why did they do this? He said, let me tell you why they did it. Because of the circumstances. So even today, we've got to understand the circumstances that is coming out of Washington that's talking about so much divisiveness in the nation. We've got a sick man as president right now, but the nation is covered over. So we've got to understand, as we continue to fight for our civil rights, our human rights, our voting rights, our dignity, that we understand even a larger system. So black folks now must look at that system as it is today. I never thought 60 years later I'd be sitting here talking with you about the same kind of constraints that we faced in 1960. Here we are facing them in 2019. We don't see the signs that says colored only or white only. What we do see is what we call subliminal kinds of messaging when it comes to moving certain areas, when it comes to employment, when it comes to a segregated educational system. Those etiological factors are still very present. So now we've got to adjust to how do we not merely survive, but how do we thrive in this kind of society? And so those of us who came from that movement now, we're doing as our teachers taught us, we're encouraging the young people. We're letting them know what happened. And the key word is that we've got to teach them consequences. There are consequences for everything that you do. We knew there was a consequence if you went down the wrong side of the street, or if you cussed out somebody, or you whistled at a white woman, or whatever. The young people today, because we brought them up, they don't understand consequences. So now we got to teach them your consequences. If you don't vote, you don't count. That's a consequence. So now we got to come back full circle in subtle kind of racism and teach the consequences if you don't get involved in challenging the system.
Wow. You know, Doc, we have been labeled, and those of us, And certainly, as you were going and working through the movement in the 60s, as you are now, I'd like to, if you will, if you expound about all of these labels that are given to people that refuse to accept the status quo of being militant or of being a person that's a rabble rouser and that kind of thing. When and you know, in modern days, it's called bullying, which all it was at that time, and people that. So I guess what I'm asking is, in your quest during that time, that to refuse to be bullied, only to see that continuing now in 2019, and for our young people that are oblivious to the fact that they are dealing with the same situations that you were dealing with in the 60s, I was dealing with in the 70s, and they think that they have arrived because they can live next door to a less melanated family. What might you say to them?
First of all, I'd say understand who you are in relationship to your surrounding and your circumstances. Otherwise, you'd be considered as lost. And once you're lost, you don't know where you're going, and you're confused in your thinking. So one has to back up. I'd say to the young people, understand who you are. First of all, understand an overall system that in some cases still has the covert racist ideas that permeate our society. So understand that you are a young woman or a young man. And in order for you to move up, you've got to understand how the system works. And then how will you work within that system? We were actually working within the system. When they labeled us militants, we weren't working outside of the system. We were using our constitutional rights, talking about voting is not outside the system. Seeking housing is not outside the system. Challenging transportation rights was not outside the system. So stay in the system, understand the voting, understand the redistricting, understand why it's so necessary for you to maintain who you are, to change a system that is not necessarily productive for making you a better human being and a better person. So I would tell them, stay within that system, but challenge that system and use that legal system to improve the overall environmental conditions, social and psychological environmentals in your life. But whatever you do, don't quit, don't give up, don't bow, don't back up, and don't break. Stay in that path, because you're not doing it for yourself now. You're doing it for the generation now and the generation that's to come. It's an unselfish cause that we're about. If my mother had gotten in my way, I'd have said, Mama, you got to sit down right now. You can't get in my way. This is bigger than me. And it's that fervor that we've got to reinstitute into this generation, because it's so easy now to say, well, I think I'll go to happy hour and eat a tapas. I'll go to the 5 o'clock thing and we'll sit and have a martini or whatever, light wine. That we cannot afford that time. That's not to say not have fun, but we've got to understand that we are now back into a strong moral and ethical war of survival for us as a people.
Wow, Doc. You are laying down a lot of knowledge and a lot of nuggets. You know, and as you do that, I noticed also in the resume that you were and still remain a part of the NAACP. And I hear, unfortunately, so many disparaging marks about the NAACP as a whole. And people have no clue as to what the NAACP is about, what it does, the importance of it. So as you just shared with our young people and us as well about what we need to do and about staying within the system, can you give us any advice on why we need to be a part and a viable part of organizations such as the NAACP?
Well, if you want a dog, if you've got a big watchdog and you've got a big watchdog protecting your property, if you want that dog to protect your property and be strong and have a big bark and a bite, you got to feed that dog. And if you don't feed the thing that protects you, it's going to die off and it will get weak. So if we want the NAACP, the Urban League, National Action Network, in our day, Operation Breadbasket, whatever it is, then we've got to feed those with our own economic input. We've got to put our money there so it can be productive, because you've got legal costs, you've got research costs, you've got court costs. And if we're to challenge a system within a system, then we've got to put the necessary factors together, the people and the money to do that. So the NAACP, when you look back, when they were formed in 1905 and they put it all together in many of the 1954 school board decisions, these were battles. These were people that were sacrificing to make it happen. So consequently, we've got to now reestablish those institutions. But I think some kind of way we started thinking that we got it made. We made a little bit of money, and we started putting up things, not called an organization, but a society of this and a society of that. And I understand the social necessity for communication, but we've got to be vigilant in what it is that we're to do now if we're to maintain ourselves from an economic and an educational, political, stable people.
Wow. You know, Doc, most of us as people that have allowed ourselves to be identified as African American, or if we feel we're African American, etc., are aware of the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And most people, even today, will try to quote some of his sayings, or they'll say, well, you know, I didn't necessarily agree with a peaceful act, rather than I feel like I should have been, that he should have been more aggressive. You have already talked to us about the system. You've talked to us about staying vigilant and feeding that dog.
Yeah.
And I know that you cannot speak for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but what do you feel that he might express about this topic, as far as the NAACP and the Urban League and those guys moving forward?
Well, he was in the same boat. He didn't call it NAACP. He called it Southern Christian Leadership Conference. It's just a different name. We had SNCC, we had SCLC, we had what Farmer was doing, the CORE. We had Congress of Racial Equality. So there's always been organization. But the mere fact that they painted or maybe painting Dr. King into a pacifist role, he was not. It took more courage to walk into Alabama, Mississippi, dogs barking at you, than it does to get a gun and go out and shoot. Dr. King said, here I've got 5 pistols and you've got 12 tanks. Now, what good is it for me to come with my 5 pistols and your 12 tanks? Let's sit down and use a different strategy. And that's when he took up and started the nonviolence, as he went over and studied Mahatma Gandhi. And if you notice, Mahatma Gandhi, he used the same strategy, and he turned India all the way around and took it over from the British. And they knew that they had to use that strategy. So he used the nonviolent strategy, which was very difficult to do. It was very difficult. And most of us who were students, no doubt about it, we were afraid when we sat down here. We were afraid when we marched. We didn't know whether we would come back. But you've got to understand that there is something down inside that says the cause is bigger than myself. And if I am loyal to that cause, then we all will maintain a certain degree of freedom. Dr. King said, none of us are free until when? We're all free. Now in the Black community, I got mine, you go get yours. I moved to my gated community. I haven't got time to look over for you. I made mine, now you make yours. That was not the case. In the Black community, if I had a cup of sugar, you had a cup of sugar. We shared, we gave, we understood, we cried together. Now we have become, in our myopic way of looking at it, I've got mine, I worked hard, you get yours. So we've taken on many of the traits of the dominant culture. We didn't have all these heart attacks and mental illnesses and all this. We never talked about, we never talked about mama. If you played the dozens, you got beaten up by your own people. You didn't talk about mama. You might not have liked it, but you went by somebody's church on Sunday morning. I don't care if you out all Saturday night. There were ethical and moral fibers that were put inside of us, but those have become watered down now. We've got to reinstitute that now. Even in our religious sphere, sometimes our churches have become so big that we don't really get the essence of the message that we are our brother and our sister's keeper. We do have a moral obligation to look out for each other. We've lost that. All we want to do is come and hear a great choir, a great message, and the only inconvenience we want to face is parking. Sometimes we've got to go back and do more than that to find out who is sitting on the pew with us and how do we link arms and move in a horizontal, we're connected vertically.
Wow. Wow, Doc, I could sit and listen to you all day, brother. It- I like to kind of fast forward, but it's the same topic. With all of the insane undertakings that we see in Washington, D.C. and other areas among the Senate individuals, among those congresspersons, among people that's being selected for housing, to be in charge of housing. And I specifically would like to park there for a minute. When we have an individual in place, and I'm not asking you to personally attack any person, but when do we have an individual in place in charge of housing that have the audacity to say to denigrate people that unfortunately whose own mom had a nervous breakdown, whose own mom was struggling to rear him and his brother, who he himself was seen as special ed, and only thing that saved him was when they tried to stab this kid, but the belt buckle stopped the knife, etc. What, in your opinion, I'm having difficulty even asking the question. You would you think that an individual with that mentality, who's expressing the way he feels now, it, and I know that you study psychology, etc. And I'm trying to word this properly here, Doc. What what do you think is causing his this whole mentality that he displays, knowing firsthand the difficulties and the unfairness that he himself and his mom and family lived through, to now allegedly is has done a 180.
Mhm.
I'm confused with that one.
Yeah. Well, let me. I'll ask it. Ask. You hate to ask a question to answer a question. My question would be, what's new?
Okay.
Uncle Ben Carsons have been around a long time. They
True.
all the way through. They call them house Negroes. They would do
True.
anything to preserve their survival, whether it's a mental or economic or just a survival. You've always had people of color in all races, to come from a survivalistic mode. And then once you play that role so long, it becomes you. Remember this: what you think about, your thoughts become your words, and your words become your deeds, and your deeds become your behavior, and your behavior becomes your habits, and your habits become your values, and your values become your destiny. And his destiny started with his thoughts. So consequently, he believed in what he is. So my job is not to destroy that brother or try to enlighten him, because he is who he is, but he is not alone. This has been going on. Um, I mean, they turned in Moses, the one who went against Moses. They turned. This has been going on all throughout civilization, as long as we have that. So I don't try to. I understand where he is. I understand why he is. He will have to answer the question in the largest sense when it comes to uh, uh, what he's done with housing, what he's done with the budget, what he's done. But as long as those that believe that satisfy their master, we have to determine in 2019 who is our master, who is the person that we're trying to please. Some of us are trying to please people that don't even know who we are. So we've got to understand, who are we trying to please. And once you get clear, that's when I go back to my initial thought: understanding who you are. Who are you trying to please? We're trying to please people that wouldn't care anything about us. But if you please those people that don't care anything about you, and they reward you with a biscuit, then you continue to please them. So we got to understand who is it that we want to please. I want to please God first. Then I want to please my family second. Then I will please my friends. Then others will come in. So I keep my priorities very straight, because I understand if I don't please the highest in my family, my friends, then I suffer consequences. And what happens psychologically, some don't even realize that they're suffering consequences. They just think it's all fair, it's all right. For example, we've got a mentally ill president now. He is totally detached from all reality. But in his own mind, he's doing fine. In fact, he says he's doing great. So
Yeah.
not to demean, but to call it as you see it, And that's what you see now. So once you understand what it is, like I've told people, whatever you do, and I'm by myself on it, please stop it. Let's not impeach president. Do not impeach him. Yes, do the inquiry and all this, but don't impeach him because he will go out a hero. He wants to be impeached. He wants to be. When you go up against the Supreme Court and all these things, I want to be impeached. Please impeach me. Then I'll go out as a Paschal lamb. Look at today's report. Latinos and blacks have the lowest job rate ever. That's on today's. Look at the economy. Look at the stock market. I'm doing a great job. I'm closing off the board. I'm doing a great job. And they kill me off. Look at they kill me. But if we let him go through the voting process, then all that he has done, whether it's Ukraine or whether it's Birmingham, it'll all come out in the wash. So we cannot do this. And I think that's, I didn't mean to get real political on it, but it really impacts, it impacts us because we've got to watch the bigger picture. We just can't jump on board and say, let's do this to this man because he's going to help us. We've got to be clear-minded and very pragmatic in the approach that we do in the political section and what we're doing. And I think that's, and that comes back to, we are, as an African people, we are basically a decent people. We're a spiritual people. We're people that we have a propensity to care, but we're losing that gradually because we're sitting at the feet of, eating at the table of what we think is success. Success was when we care for each other, not how many houses we own.
Absolutely. Doc, you are on fire and all kind of thumbs are going up and hearts are going up and you bring in the pain, brother. Listen, perfect segue into athletics. Now, both of us are former athletes. And, there's so much.
Are you calling me farmer?
Well, I'm talking about as far as athletics go. Well, you're probably still a present athlete. Probably still a present athlete. But yeah, you know what? I'm gonna speak for myself, Doc. I'm a former athlete, and I know that you're an athlete as well.
Yeah.
Okay. And there is so much talk back and forth, a lot of bantering about professional athletics being akin to slavery, college athletics being akin to slavery, and then now you have I don't know if you've been watching lately, they're talking about the pay to play and that kind of thing. Would you associate what's happening in athletics now as a remnant of slavery, or would you say, in your opinion, that we are overreacting because of some of the things that are taking place as far as athletics are concerned?
When you say you speaking at the professional level, because they just passed with high college students to be paid for what they do. Which level are you talking about?
Well, actually, let's go all the way to the top, to the professional level. Where you got to jump so high and run so fast and all of this thing, and then you're called the property of a certain team and that kind of thing.
Well, I wouldn't mind being a slave for $100 million a year.
Okay.
Slaves got nothing. You were poor. Nobody is forcing any of those professional athletes to do that. Once you sign your name to that, I don't remember slaves, and I think I'll sign on to Mr. Washington over here. Slaves did not sign on for that journey. They were brought.
Right.
Athletes, they run, they jump, and they sign to get that, whether it's a signing bonus, and paid hundreds of millions of dollars. So in reality, they are the property of who runs them. But they sign on. Slaves did not sign on for your property. They were, I don't know. I started to say drafted, but they weren't drafted. They were just enslaved. They were brought and became in bondage. But the athletes are not. They can choose. All they got to do is say, you can't buy me and walk off.
Right.
But that dollar sign says, I'm going to be there. Then once you're there, then we say, no, see, if you come into my house, Melvin, and I'm serving beans and you don't like beans, you got one or two options. You can get out or eat the beans. But you make the choice. So an athlete has to say, do I want to do this? And if I want to do this, these are the parameters. The same way with when we went through that whole thing with the cheerleaders. They were saying, uh, I heard a lot of stuff around the cheerleaders, and some of them said, you knew what you were getting into. You're into that world. Do you sign in? Why don't you quit? If you don't like it, quit. Because you will suffer what Kaepernick has gone through, because that system is so corrupt. It is so corrupt. But if you sign your name to it, then you bought into that system. Now, what I like is that the athletes can come together to attempt to really come together and do a boycott Sunday. Do you know how many millions we've left it to? All 10 said we're not going to play. Then they would get something. But they've got the Players League, but I don't see that kind of negotiation going on. It's always negotiating, but it's not that real. We're going to stop and $2 billion are going to be lost in advertisement on Sunday because they've signed into this that they won't do that. Slavery, we did not have a choice.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Because, Doc, I often engage in that conversation sometimes, and it's difficult to get individuals to think just as you are prompting us to do, and to look at the various parameters that causes one to think, and the measurement of what slavery actually was as there was one, you may remember the book, The $40 Million Slave, and it was very popular at one time. As a matter of fact, it's on my shelf now. And although I understood where he was, I can't think of the author's name, and I can't see the book, but it's here someplace. Anyway, I understood what he was trying to portray, but I too thought it was misplaced because of you being compensated for your ability. You're not being forced. I mean, everything that you just explained, sometimes it raises a question. Now, if I can digress and move a little lower, when we have our college kids, and you and I were one of those, we both accepted scholarships to play in college. However, now with the NCAA talking about not paying athletes, and I don't think they should get paid, etc., but you're paying coaches $9-10 million annually, plus endorsement deals, and you're riding off the backs of the athletes.
Right.
Is there a way to equate a misdeed here? People like to say, well, their education is getting paid for. That it doesn't even come, and you know this personally, it doesn't even come close to giving you a free education when you're out there practicing and sweating and meetings and traveling and trying to balance your books, etc. So, I'm having a conversation, but I really want to ask the question: would you equate having a scholarship and not necessarily having to go to the comptroller's office and write a check be a free education when you are trading your physical person and mental person to quote pay at the comptroller's window? I guess is what I'm really trying to get at.
First of all, they're not getting a free education. They are paying coaches making $70 million a year. Alabama, there's only $20-25 million a year. They're paying for the coach's salary. They're paying every time they're on television. That school gets all of that money. Those are back on the backs of those athletes. I believe that there should be some form of compensation that they should receive for that, not just to educate. They're getting the education, but I would hate to see them picking up. First of all, they wouldn't stay if they picked up. You've seen those that signed early contracts; they left. So I would love to see them get that education along with being adequately compensated, or put in a trust fund as they do it to work it out. I don't know the actual working out, but work out where it's in a trust fund, so that if they're a great Heisman Trophy winner and they go through like Bo and different ones, that when they finish, if they get drafted, they can go ahead and make their money as a professional football. If they don't, they got $3 or $4 million over here while they were in school that they've earned. We live in a capitalist system. They've earned that money. Or if they play 1 year and tear Achilles heel, they still got $4 million over here that the pro ball player, pro league gonna get rid of them. But they've earned that during those times when they were 18 to 22 years old. So I think that how that's worked out, it should be some form of compensation. I don't think that they should say, here's $500,000, because that kind of money, I don't know. You might be smarter than me, but if somebody gave me $2,000 or $3,000, $100,000 when I was 18 and 19, I just go right through it probably. And we see that happening even with some pro athletes unless they get advised. So in college, let's put it in perspective. Be compensated for the kind of work that you do. I'm not putting a percentage on it, but also get your education because that money's going to run out. That money's going to run out. But so consequently, you'll have something that we've always said, get education, and you can always use that. So it's a parallel kind of issue that I'm looking at. And I never really thought about that until you asked me.
Okay, but you know, it sounds like you put a lot of thought into it prior to the question because I mean you laid it out very 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 smoothly.
No.
You know, as we prepare to close, Doc, I want to ask this question. I was doing a show one night about an organization that I'm blessed to be a part of called Shackles 400. And we did the show on August 20th, 2019 to commemorate the 400-year history of slaves being actually documented as far as having been in America. As we were talking about the black code, and as we were talking about the pig code and all this kind of thing, we received a young man came on named Damien, 17 years old. And he talked about being, he said, I'm 17 years old, and sometimes I'm embarrassed to be black because of all the negative things that are said about us, because of the way some of the kids that look like me act. And which is exactly what we were trying to, what Shackles 400 is all about, is to show our kids the trauma, the knowledge that they have no idea what's happening, to show them about how they are gunned down and how was part of the quote black code and slave code, how the property owner could shoot you down and he's not guilty because he's within his rights, that kind of thing. But with both of us being quote activists and being an unquote, what advice, what would you share with this young man? I was hoping he'd come on this evening, but I don't see him there. What advice would you give to him? 17 years old, and he's saying that he's embarrassed sometimes to be black because of much of the negative things that he sees from individuals that share the same skin tone as he does.
I applaud that young man.
Okay.
I applaud that young man because there are those that don't even ask that question. They just jump in and follow the trend, whatever the trend is, and I'm gonna be just like them. But he's raising the kind of questions that's gonna give him some answers as to first, why am I ashamed? What is that behavior like? What is it about that behavior I don't like? What does that behavior? Is it negative and where I want to go? Then I go, where do you want to go? And why does that behavior stop you from getting there? Then what kind of behavior do you think that you would like to see among black people? Do you understand why those that you're ashamed of, that's the same color people? Do you know all the etiological factors that created that? The fear, the low self-esteem, the low self-worth. Then if you understand the factors and you don't like it, and if you're concerned about your people, then you need to, at 17, you need to start saying, let me get busy so I can get back in here and help those who I think are going somewhat astray, rather than saying I'm ashamed and walking off, because then you know better than anybody else. You've abdicated your responsibility as a concerned person who loves your people. So if you truly love your people, then you need to understand why there's a certain kind of behavior, why people maybe get louder and get drunk and act a certain way that embarrasses you. Then once you understand that, but you got to understand who they are and what created that. Because by and large, all the way from the pyramids of Africa, we've been good people all the way back, but we've been conditioned in so many ways, and we've got to look at what caused it, what systems caused it, then attack those systems. Then at 17, at 18, you will become the kind of person that we're going to need, because then you'll sit with my grandson will sit with your sister, and your sister will sit with my cousin. Pretty soon I got 5 of y'all over there, and that person who's over there acting as you don't think they should act, you all to sit and talk, and now you got 6 people with you. And that's the way we build the movement.
Wow, fantastic. Well, excuse me, Dr. Durley, you have really given us some nuggets to think about. And I don't want to be greedy. You've been here almost 45, a little over 45 minutes, and we started a little early just in conversation. I want to thank you so very much for agreeing. Quite honestly, I want to have you back to talk some more. About actually, we have to talk about. Last thing, I promise you, we have to talk about a celebration. I'm calling it a celebration that's happening on January 14th, 2020, that involves a certain Dr. Gerald Durley.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'll receive at the King Celebration the Freedom Award for Ecology. If I had to say one thing to your listening audience today, I believe that the civil and human rights movement of today is climate change, eco-justice, and global warming. We call it climate crisis now, because when you connect the dots, and for the last 9 years, I've spent my entire time dealing with the climate changes that are negatively, disproportionately impacting people of color all over the world and poor. When you look at the climate, and we just broke a record here in Georgia, 90 straight days of 90-degree weather, unheard of. Those are cataclysmic changes that were occurring because of profits over people. The business community has put a lot of carbon dioxide in the air. It has caused a greenhouse effect, and it's impacting us in urban areas because we don't have trees to absorb the carbon dioxide. So our cancer rates are up, our asthmatic rates are up. When the schools are closed, our education is down. Our access to healthcare is limited. What happened in the Bahamas, what happened in Africa, the droughts that are going on, it's destroying us as a people. When it comes to food deserts, right now, there's something called GMO, genetically modified organism, because they're growing vegetables in test tubes because Monsanto has put pesticides and they can't wash it off. And we're the ones buying the vegetables because we can't afford organic food. So we've got to look at this. Everybody has a constitutional right to clean water, clean air. And but now we're being denied that. So we've got to come full circle and come back into how is this whole thing around climate negatively, disproportionately impacting the people I'm called to serve. So I'm standing on that. And that's the reward I'll be receiving. But also 3 years ago, I got that award from Barack Obama. But again, putting it out there, and particularly talking to churches, to preachers. What good is it for you talking about I'm going to heaven if you're dead on earth? You got to have something to live for here before you get to the golden gates and all of this. So we got to look at what we're doing to ourselves, what we're doing to our bodies, what we're doing to our lungs, and what we're doing to the environment in which we live. The environment, the environment is impacted because many of the toxic waste dumps are in our neighborhoods and in our community. Most of the water that's being polluted are out in the streams in our rural areas. These are things that it's not a priority for us. Police brutality, healthcare, these are the kinds of things that are a priority. But now we've got to move our priority up to connect the dots to the climate that's really destroying us on a lot of fronts.
Well, Dr. Durley, we certainly want to congratulate you on that fantastic honor, and you certainly, again, you've given us so much knowledge and so many things to ponder, and I'm happy to see, Doc, the thumbs up and the hearts just flying everywhere. So people are listening, and if I did not tell you before, we have people literally all over the country. I mean, I'm talking Venezuela. I'm talking obviously on the continent. They're from everywhere. They are well, you know how the internet works. So they usually come on and ask questions. But hey, as long as they're not asking questions that means you're doing a fantastic
Or
job.
maybe I confuse them so much they don't know what to ask.
Oh, no. They're not confused, because that's why the thumbs are going up and the hearts are going up. Dr. Durley, it's been great having you here this evening, sir. And again, I do want to repeat that we'd love to have you back to talk about some more things, and hopefully you'll come. You know, Doc, I do you have a copy of your book with you?
No, I don't.
We didn't. Okay. I want our audience to go out and get this book.
It's called I Am Amazed.
I want our friends to go and get this book by Dr. Gerald Durley. It's a fantastic read. As I told you guys, I have 2 copies of this book. Why do I have 2 copies? I have one that's autographed by Dr. Durley, and I have one that's not. And I value them. I guess one day I'll give one possibly to my son and for him to read, but he can't have my autographed copy. So go out and can you tell them how they can get I Am Amazed?
Well, it's on Amazon. It's on Amazon, and if you'll notice, the reason I call it I Am Amazed, because all of those thumbs up and all of those hearts, those are amazing people, but they never stop to say, I'm amazed at what's going on in my life. I'm amazed at how I'm making a difference. I'm amazed at what has happened to me, but I did not go under. So I started looking at all that, born to a 16-year-old mother, and I'm amazed that I'm still standing. And if you look on the back, the people that endorsed it, Andrew Young, John Lewis, C.T. Vivian, the governor, and it's all about, I think Billy Graham even did it. But anyway, more importantly, is being I am amazed. And if you believe it, you can be amazing too. Don't ever let anybody tell you that you can't. I stayed in the kindergarten, and it's in the book. I stayed there twice in the kindergarten, 2 times. And the reason they kept me back, because when I was starting out, I couldn't get a word out. I stuttered. So I was a heavy stutterer, and they told my mother that I was a slow learner, and they put me in educationally mentally retarded classes until the 4th grade because I stuttered. But a lady, and there's always somebody in your life who will say, wait a minute, I stuttered too. Why don't you come over here and let me talk to you? And that teacher pulled me to the side. The teacher stuttered, and I never went to the, and they found out that I was not the dumb, slow learner. I just had a speech impediment. That was in the 4th grade. They set me down, tested me. I never went to the 5th grade. I don't stutter now. And but you use that as in the back of my mind, that there's something that will amaze you about you and what you can do when you put your mind to it.
Wow. Fantastic. Dr. Durley, can you tell our audience how they may contact you, sir? If they're interested in contacting you or having you come through and talk. Okay. So listen, guys, you feel free, again, as we welcome Dr. Durley, you can contact me at www.dyingonmyfeet.com. And we want you, ladies and gentlemen, to
Gerald.Durley@gmail.com.
Gerald.Durley@gmail.com. That's the best way to contact Dr. Durley. Gerald.Durley@gmail.com. So listen, we thank you for being here, Dr. Durley. It's been great, and we are so happy that you're here. Please say hello to Miss Muriel for us, and again, we wish you the very best.
You know, and so good about it. Thank you for acknowledging my wife. Last month we were married 51 years.
Wow. Well, congratulations and happy anniversary.